Welcome to our webinar covering the many challenges of hiring top talent in the construction industry. By the end, you should have a solid understanding of the reasons for the hiring crunch and what you can do to fight back. First, let's go through some housekeeping. Ask any questions or make any comments at any time in the chat box to the right. There are also downloadable assets in the resources section that should help build on what you hear today. Most importantly, we will email you a link to the replay as soon as it becomes available today. Now I'll hand it over to Justin Judy, our partner manager. Justin?
Awesome. Thanks, Letha. Yeah, if you guys can all first help me welcome our guest today. We have Scott Petersen with HIRECLICK. Scott is an authority on all things hiring, right? He specializes in the contractor space, which makes it a unique offering for a lot of contractors. And one of the main reasons we wanted to bring him in today, because his perspective is different and more focused than the traditional hiring experts you may talk to or hear from on a day-to-day basis. How's your day going so far, Scott?
It's great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to, I guess, nerd out on all things hiring and things like that. It's a big challenge for everybody, so there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, I know, and it's interesting whenever you talk to a subject matter expert who's good at one thing, and they're like, "I just like to talk hiring." That's like my nerd talk is hiring. Like I'm a tech guy, you're a hiring guy, right? So whenever we get to talk things that we're passionate about or have experience in, it's just a good time. So I appreciate you joining us, and you have over 20 years experience in the space, right? Do you mind just kind of giving us a brief background on you and who you are, where you came from, and really why people should listen to your advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I sort of got my first introduction into the recruitment side of it while I was at Gannett Newspaper Group. So I ran the digital initiatives for a Gannett newspaper here in South Dakota, in Sioux Falls. And at that time, Gannett was partnered with Career Builder. So I got a lot of direct experience on just selling Career Builder and, in particular, selling it outside of what I would consider to be the big major NFL cities. So just, more remote areas, mid-sized cities, things like that. From there, we started a company called Classified Verticals where we established regional job boards, mostly in the upper Midwest. And then that led us ultimately to what we're doing today at HireClick. And HireClick is a software product really geared towards small to medium sized businesses and really trying to get them to really optimize their whole hiring strategy beyond just posting job boards, but just really paying attention to all the things that matter to generate the right applicants.
Yeah, and I just got back early this morning. Actually, I was supposed to get back yesterday with flights and mess and all the hail in Detroit and the weather in Nashville, where I came from. I was with the American Fence Association last week, and one of the topics that came up at just one of the roundtables when we were sitting around is like, how in the heck are you guys finding good help? And honestly, not as a shameless plug to HireClick, but one of the people at the table was like, I got a thing. I got a thing. I met this guy through a guy named Matt, and it's awesome, and we've been using it, and it's infinitely cheaper and better and whatever, right? So that's one of the main reasons you and I started talking is I heard about you guys from a mutual friend of ours. And you and I started talking, and I was like, people need to hear just some of the strategy and some of the things that I learned from talking to you because ArcSite works in a lot of verticals, right? Fencing is one. That's where I was just talking about, but we work in a ton of them, and every single industry is facing the same problem. The labor crunch, the lack of qualified talent, the low experience, the flaky employees coming in and out and high turnover rates and people not wanting to do, blue collar work, quote unquote. But one of the things I heard you mention that really kind of piqued my interest during one of our conversations is you need to think of marketing. You need to think of hiring more as a marketing strategy than as an HR strategy. Do you kind of just mind expanding on what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, for sure. So that conversation comes really logically for me by trade. I'm a marketer. Before I kind of got into the digital world and so forth, and the sort of commonality between both of those are, if you think about a marketing funnel or a marketing equation at all, it works off this funnel concept. And the funnel concept is it starts really big on one side, and you're trying to get candidates or opportunities in one side of the funnel, ultimately getting them to do something, whether it's buy something in an e-commerce store, or in our case, getting people to actually apply and hopefully qualified talent to apply. I think one of the things that in the hiring world, There's been job boards out there forever. We used to run and still do run some in the upper Midwest, and job boards are a pretty simplified transaction. You part with dollars, and in exchange, you get people to directly apply. That is part of the funnel, but it's the most simplistic part of it. I think all of us employers right now face the exact same thing that marketers face, and that is we have to reach the right people with the right message. Kind of create other assets that really help to inform that job seeker of who we are as an employer, ultimately just trying to get them to apply, but they don't do it like they used to. They're more researched now. They're going to wait to really discover what's the right opportunity, not just who has an opening. And because of that, yeah, I mean, marketers, have been sort of, preaching this years and years and years that it's the optimization of the funnel, not just one side of it. And that's exactly where we find ourselves right now in this hyper competitive market.
Yeah, and because I'm a sales guy by trade, that's, what I've done for the majority of my life at this point, being the age I am now. And we we think of things similarly too. Like top of funnel stuff comes in, you start the transaction, you sell value, you meet their needs, you educate them, right? And you really consult with them to help figure out why your product is right. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say around this marketing and hiring nowadays too, is like customers who buy products, so we'll stick with the fencing train, just because we were talking fencing a minute ago, can do as much research as they want. They can figure out all about the products and types and anything that they need and they feel like is the right value and benefit for them, sort of on their own if they choose to. So they really rely on you to be sort of that subject matter expert to kind of guide them in the right place, right? So as a company, your job is to really educate your prospect in this case, which is a potential employee, potential team member. Sorry, employee is kind of a dirty word sometimes. Potential team member to get on your team, and if you want them to join, they need to be sold on the value of why to join. They're no longer like, you're no longer giving the handout in this day and age of doing them a favor by giving them a job. A lot of the times there's open competition, and you used a stat recently about like project manager openings. Like how many of those right now are open on Indeed
So
are
I think
open
the yeah
on
the
Indeed?
I think the exact job title that I searched was project estimator.
Okay.
And on Indeed, the most sort of comprehensive job search out there. I just looked this morning. There was about 10,300 job listings for project estimator. Now that was everywhere. That was all across the world. But you get the idea that
Yeah.
in the marketing world, what do marketers fight? They fight, how do I cut through the clutter and get myself noticed? We find ourselves as employers in that exact same challenge right now. If I have one of those project estimator jobs, how can I make my opportunity um, stand out? How can I not just get the eyeballs to it, but when I get the right eyeballs, how can I be persuasive? How can I engage that potential candidate and so forth to really, really convince them to take that action and apply to mine versus the other 10,000?
Yeah. And I'd like to kind of ask, I guess, kind of a two-part question. And one's going to be about the first part, just to kind of preface you, because I haven't talked about what I was going to ask you prior to this. I want to ask about ways to kind of reach new audiences. And then I want to talk about ways of where you do reach a new audience of maybe people who haven't seen you before. How do you help increase that conversion? So can we start with like some strategies you've seen or you've employed or you've, proven successful on how to maybe reach a new segment of audience or a new, potential team member base that you may not be able to reach prior?
Yeah, for sure. So I would first start by saying this in that, job boards, while they can be, sort of massive seas of information, they're very useful. I mean, they represent the largest pool of active job seekers, people that are, not doing their favorite thing, not playing golf, not watching their favorite TV program. They're either on their phone or their PC, and they are actively searching jobs. So job board usage is really, really important. But beyond that, that's kind of the obvious, thing that most everybody does. There's a lot of different opportunities, and we, at HireClick, we always really try to focus on saying, let's first and foremost look at, your footprint that you already have right now, and how can you leverage that footprint to also not just sell products or get new, sort of like, bids or anything, but how can I leverage that footprint to also represent our job listings and try to, open up that applicant flow. So as an example, first and foremost, every business has a website, and we all, understood years and years ago, even if we're not an e-commerce site, even if we don't represent digital products, you have to have a website for, if for no other reason, just information sharing. Okay. Recruiting is the same. You really need a presence online with a well thought out career site that not just hosts your job listings, but really helps you to differentiate yourself as an employer. Here are some of the unique things about our business. Pictures and videos that sort of represent, the culture of that company that you're working at or own, or a very, very common journey for job seekers is to see an opening on a job board, but before they decide to apply, they pop open another window in their browser and they go out and do a Google search, and they're out on that company's website saying, hey, before I apply, I want to learn a little bit more about this. Okay, so really, really important to establish that presence either with a section on your existing website or to create a careers website, which is it's pretty easy to do. Secondly, social media footprint. Everybody's using social media in one way or another. Hiring systems like HIRECLIck do a very good job of allowing employers to instantly share out job information out to their social media pages. Places like a Facebook business page, potentially a LinkedIn business page, things like that. And drive those people back to that career site to get them through the right part of the journey. The last thing that I would say is, things that are just so often overlooked, that we've found to be really, really effective. So, HIRECLIck, again, we sort of specialize in that small to medium sized business segment, and they are looking to inch out every possible dollar that they can, to try to go get more exposure that isn't costing more dollars. So as an example, like we always say, if you're a business that has walk-in foot traffic, it is really, really important to go get signage up in your office, your location, your work site, whatever it is, with QR codes that link back to your career site. Who is that walk-in traffic? Could be customers. It could be, potential business partners. It's the people that know you the best. Those are the people that are really meaningful to drive to that career site. So, did it answer your question, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and it kind of inspired a couple thoughts because, just doing my due diligence prior to this chat, some like research and things that I've learned is about 2/3 nowadays of prospective job seekers go to that company's website and learn about the company more than they do about the role. And about 1/3 of those will just completely bail on an application if they can't find any sufficient information about the team, the culture, how they do business, what the leadership is like, the history. That's why, a lot of those web pages will have like this "Who are we" type page, like teach your prospects, both customers and prospective team members, about who you are as a company, what's important, why people should choose to do business with you both as a team member level and as a customer level. Those pages serve more than one purpose. We always think of it from what are our customers going to learn from these pages, right? But those same pages are serving an internal purpose quite often when you're talking about a new team member joining or a prospective employee trying to get into your company. They want to make sure that they understand what you stand for as well, because if it doesn't line up, they're not going to have a good time. You're not going to have a good time. Company values, mission statements, all that sort of stuff is very important, because people nowadays, they want to find the right people to work with. Most of us have had a job where the people are, in most jobs, the people make the job, right? Yeah. There's jobs that are just fun jobs for sure, but the people you work with day in and day out are what can really differentiate. And that's kind of what everybody's looking for. Everybody's looking for that, brother or sisterhood, that fellowship, that family type mentality. And if you can communicate through the things you just talked about to the folks that, hey, you're going to fit right in here because we already share the same values. And where, if you're family first, like say that and mean it, right? Don't just say it, but you got to mean it. Because if on the flip side, a new team member comes in and that's all just lip service or window dressing, they're going to know that right away. And you're going to have a turnover problem. So you've got to be open, honest, consistent throughout the process, both top of funnel, like you talked about, all the way through to conversion. And you sort of said, like, hey, job boards are where you got to go because it's where people are looking, right? You just have to be there. It's just like advertising. You have to do it. But when it comes to standing out on those job boards and really focusing on conversion, that's where some people can kind of get lost, right? They find it pretty difficult to stand out. Is the website the best way to help them stand out? Now, once we've worked through the funnel, we get towards the bottom and there's, say I'm a prospective new team member and I'm deciding between 3 companies. Maybe I apply to all 3. Maybe I only pick one, depending on my personality type. How do I sort of edge that person towards the one versus, maybe skipping out on mine?
Yeah, I do think the website's the best way to do that. I mean, it's so commonplace for all of us now. When we want information, we grab our phone, we grab our computer, and we just start, and I think more than that, we have pretty high expectations as consumers, and in this case, job seekers, that we expect to be able to get the information that I'm looking for. And to your point, if you don't find it does sort of like, throw some doubt, in your mind of, maybe I don't want to apply. It could be a great employer, a great company to work for. But if you're not saying that and not, really, really getting that out there. And I think one of the things when I talk to, we have the luxury of talking to a whole bunch of employers. And I'm always amazed in hearing a couple things. Number one, I'll say, why are you unique as an employer? Like, who are you as an employer? What's your personality? And we get a lot of them saying, you know what, we've never really sat down and really had that conversation internally. What does make us unique? So, I mean, I think that's first and foremost is you have to understand who you are, your strengths, what are those things that differentiate us a little bit. And then it's really, really important to get that out, online. Job seekers will use that. They might share it. They might, keep on referring back to it. And, job boards are such a linear transaction. I get that listing out there. Somebody clicks it, they apply, they go forward. If you can brand a potential employee and a potential team member with, this is who we are, even if they decide, that's not the right job for me right now, you've kind of burned that in their brain that when they're in the market for that job, they're going to think back to you rather than just necessarily going to only job boards. They're going to think of you specifically. And those are really, really great job seekers because they already know who you are. They've learned about you. They decided that you could potentially be a good fit. Those are the people that you want on the team. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to steal something from a friend of mine named Sam. He runs a marketing agency, focuses on trades as well. And he did an exercise in a room once I happened to be present for, and I found pretty interesting. And he asked pretty much everybody kind of one off, like, what makes your company different, right? And this was put in like the sales type perspective, like when you're talking to a prospective customer, why should they buy from you? Almost everyone said the same, like 3 things. It was like, we use better materials, our workmanship's better, and we care more. Everybody did. Not everybody can do that. Not everyone's materials can be better because then it's just not possible. It's literally impossible. But everyone says the same thing. So we started talking about getting on the topic of ways to prove that. Like, what does that mean? When you say you care more, what does that actually mean? What are your opinions on things like a culture video or team member introductions or a team member spotlight on social media? If I'm applying to say, we'll just use your company, say I want to work at HIRECLICK, and you have a testimonial of you and employee A, and you're talking all about employee A and the work they do and how great they are. I see that as a prospective employee. I'm going to be like, oh boy, this guy cares about each and every team member enough to literally make videos. And I go to the website and I click, what are we all about? And it's you doing like volunteer work and give back and all this sort of stuff, that might be important to me. I mean, is that something that you almost consider a must nowadays? Do you recommend people do that? Is it something that you're just like, hey, listen, you need to humanitize your company more, or is it better to keep it more like the nuts and bolts of the specific role?
That's a really good question, and I'll be very honest. I'm such a huge fan of video for a couple reasons within the recruitment space. Number one, about if we track obviously all of our sort of traffic to our our job boards and through our software and so forth, and job seeker traffic is about 70% mobile, 30% PC. So
That's good to
I
know.
particularly love the use of video on mobile devices because it's just so passive for you to just, watch a video on your phone. You can get really great information and you don't have to be, kind of scrolling and tapping and things like that. And in terms of a message, like I think video drives the message better than anything. Whether that video is about, hey, this is what we're all about here. I mean, I've seen some just phenomenal culture type videos. I think the key is transparency. Whatever video you can put together. So if you have the dollars and you can put together that culture video, yeah, you'll get those dollars back if you utilize that well in your recruitment campaigns. If you're a small business and you don't have that budget, and we don't have that cool office to show in the culture video or whatever, we always say do not overlook a very transparent statement from the owner of the business saying, I'm thrilled that you're considering us for a job opportunity. This is what we're about here at ABC Company. And, we really invite you to apply, et cetera. That transparency to the job seeker means an awful lot. They want to know who they're working for. They want to understand, how did this business get started? Wow, they've worked really, really hard to build up a business. I can tell they really care about their customers, things like that. It doesn't have to be a super duper expensive culture video to do it, but it could just be a very, very simple shot on your mobile device and upload it to your career site and get that out there. You'll still see, some really, really good results from that. But I think even just aside from video, again, like marketing, everybody talks about eyeballs. How can I get my job listings on the eyeballs? And a lot of employers, big and small, don't maybe pay enough attention to, okay, once somebody clicks and once they start reading about the job, that content, whether it be in the form of video, it's very common to just throw those old fashioned job descriptions out on job boards. The other skills are, must be able to lift 50 pounds. And I mean, the things that are inherent to job descriptions that really don't need to be out on the job boards. I mean, I think we as an employer base need to focus a lot more on, we're going to reach the people. That part is almost becoming the easiest part. Once we reach them, what information are we giving them? Great video, a very persuasive, engaging sort of job advertisement and kind of a bit of a sales pitch on, this is why you want to consider this project estimator job. And then once that job seeker starts to take action, how easy are you making it for them to apply? That's a biggie right now too. That ultimately will affect that conversion.
Yeah, and honestly, that was going to be kind of one of my next questions. I want to make one point before I jump into that, and it was about something you said about, if you're a small business and you don't have a budget, right? You don't have a media team, you don't need a media team. Sometimes people appreciate, and I would say most of the time, people just appreciate a good piece of organic, raw, real content. It doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be produced, especially if a blue collar trade and you're not don't need to be a tech savvy person to work there. The video can absolutely just be like, here I am, here's what I care about as an owner, here's how we do things here. If you don't fit this mold, then, probably not the best fit. If you do, then great, apply, sort of thing. And I really like that, because when I think of me as I create some content, obviously, like this, but I also consume a lot of content, and it's how I learn a lot of things. I'm a big video guy, do a lot of podcasts and TED Talks and webinars and things to try to make sure that I stay on top of things. And some of my favorite ones are just conversations. They're not a well-produced commercial, flashy, anything fancy. They're just content that I'm listening to, I'm learning from, I'm able to absorb. because it's like a human conversation. I don't have to try too hard at it. I can do it passively, kind of like an audiobook versus a book. You can just sort of, mush it into your brain passively. And that sort of content for me works. And I think that resonates with the generations now too, especially the younger generation who's very video centric, and they're growing up on things like TikTok and Reels and Twitter, and everything is like 8 to 10 seconds. And if you go much longer, they lose attention. So getting a thing out there that's simple and easy to digest versus something they have to work really hard to pick apart is a different strategy altogether, and one that I personally favor and like. And then you talked about how easy is your job application, right? And that's something that, even us as a company, as a sales organization, will always discuss, like, how much friction should there be? Because there should be a little bit. You don't want to just put in a name and then that's it. You want to somewhat pre-qualify them and have them pre-qualify you, and sort of poke at a couple different topics that may come up and make them critically think about if it's the right role. I get all of that, but is there like a sweet spot between too much friction, not enough friction? How long should a job application take? Like, is there any sort of guidelines you can give our audience around those sort of topics?
Yeah, and I think the statistic that came out last year that sort of just rocked everybody's world was, it was actually came out in a SHRM article, and there was a sort of a industry resource in that article that had done a pretty exhaustive study, and they were citing right now we are up to as many as 92% of job seekers that start the application process end up bailing because of the length and complexity of that job application. So if you think about that, I'm from the upper Midwest. I'm probably tighter with my wallet than most people in the country. If you think about, if 92% are leaving the funnel, every $100 that you spend to get people in, top of funnel, 92% of those dollars are disappearing because your job application is too long. And to your point of how easy should it be, my really simple answer back is it should be as easy as you can possibly make it, because I think what we need to look at is, if we say, okay, when we all started kind of getting really, really aggressive with job boards, we might pass those people back to my website. We kind of started off saying, I need my full job application filled out. I'm just going to make an online version of that, and it's going to be better than the old paper application. What happened is those things got really long. There was a lot of information in there, potentially even having to list sensitive information like social security number, things like that. Job seekers, by and large, don't want to give that stuff out to somebody that they don't know. And the length of that job application, I think you as an employer really need to look at it to say, I know I eventually need a full job application filled out before I can hire somebody, but when I'm recruiting and just trying to generate applications and candidates for open roles, I want to ask as little as I possibly need to ask in order for me to make an informed decision to say, this person is worth setting up an interview with. Get the job application filled out after you have the interview. So figure out, if it's, hey, we're looking for welders, we need people with welding experience only. Of course, you need to know that data point, but you don't need to know, give me your last 5 jobs that you had. If somebody has welder experience, that's a pretty coveted skill set right now. If they have experience, I'm probably going to call them and at least, set up an interview and see, kind of what their situation is. So we always try to focus on, we say, if possible, you want to be under a minute for that job application. If you are requiring a login, there's a lot of different hiring systems look at the world differently. There's a lot of hiring systems out there that require that job seeker to log in prior to being able to apply. We always say, if you can figure out a way to not require a login, get them to a super easy application page. Last thing I would say, back to that mobile statistic I said, I always tell business owners, HR managers, go out to your website, go through your application process, pretend you're a job seeker, go through that application process, and then go back and do it again on a mobile device. and find out how much friction are you really putting out there. Because if 70%, probably 70 plus percent are hitting from a mobile device, a lot of times there's a great experience from a PC, but on a mobile device, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, and if you kind of expand on that statistic you were just talking, 92%, right? You probably don't hire half your interviews if you're a discerning employer and are going through and figuring out, right? So you're talking 4% then is what's left. That's 1 out of 25. If you need to hire 4 people, you need 100 applicants. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it gets watered down so dang quick that you
Yeah.
need to figure out how do I get, my funnel. You talked early in this conversation today about like optimizing a funnel, right? Like, yes, people come in, but then what happens? Even if you go through and you decide maybe I want to hire these people, you're competing with all those other behemoths in your industries, like you mentioned. You're competing trying to find local talent versus companies B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. And
Yeah.
you've got to stand out in some way. So even if you make an offer, there's no guarantee that that's one of your 4. So those numbers are probably diminished in half yet again. And you're talking for 4 positions, 200 applications all of a sudden. Like that can be a little overwhelming and scary for a business owner to think about. So how are like do you find like the owner and manager directly should be owning the hiring process? Should they be assisting in it? Should it be an HR task? Like, is there a specific thing you would recommend to? I own a company. I'm not big. I've maybe got 2 crews. I do $1.5 million a year, and I need to hire a few people. Like, should I be directly involved? Should I delegate that as an owner? Like, do you find that having an owner involved in the process makes it more attractive to somebody? Things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least that owner needs to be intimately familiar with the process, and only because it's just such a business challenge right now. I mean, at the end of the day, this sort of hiring challenge has bubbled up to almost the top of people's radar and saying, you know what, if there's one problem that I could solve in my business right now, I could just find the right team members. I mean, it's really, really become a problem. So I think it's important for those business owners to at least really, really understand this is what we're asking job seekers to go through. Are we making it easy enough? Are we differentiating ourselves? All the things that we talked about. In terms of being able to, the one thing I would say right now is um, while we sort of can easily identify these are the things that employers should probably pay attention to, the job of doing this the right way and doing it manually, if you kind of add up the steps and you say, okay, well, I guess we need to create a career site, and not just for big businesses but small businesses too. You need a career site, so you kind of got to get involved in that process, and then we need to rewrite our job descriptions into something a little more persuasive. We got to look at that, that whole funnel, that the hiring funnel that we're talking about. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of tasks to do that you either need to do that manually, or you use the word delegate. That could be delegated to really anybody in the organization if you have some technology behind it to really streamline that process. Because like every part of business right now, technology is playing a really, really big part in recruitment by being able, I think the biggest advantage in using technology in recruiting, you sort of touched on, the big, there's only so many local workers in the pool of available workers in any geography in the country. The really big employers have sophisticated hiring systems that cast their jobs out to all the job boards for them. Help make their job application really easy. I mean, things like that. It hasn't been until fairly recently where that technology has been affordable enough for small businesses to say, okay, this is going to allow me to go compete against those big employers, because that job seeker that's looking, they want to get the same amount of information, whether it's a 10,000 employee company or a 15-person company. I want to be able to find out what I want to find out. It hasn't been until fairly recently where it's palatable for small businesses to say, okay, I'm going to go grab that system that's finally affordable enough to go meet them, head to head, and go try to compete and win against those, or for that pool of available workers. So
Yeah, and affordability is one of those things that is so subjective to certain people, right?
Yeah.
Like I think back to like just a straight value conversation, like sales 101. If I was like, "Hey, do you want to buy this squishy stress ball nose that I have for $10,000?" You'd be like, "No, I do not." But if I was like, "Would you like to buy my entire house for $10,000?" You'd be like, "I will absolutely take that." So it's
Yeah.
like the money is not necessarily just a dollars game. It's about what you're getting in return for that money. And when it talks about when companies talk about cost of acquisition, most of the time they're talking about customers, right? But hiring and firing can equally shift profitability and net operating profit and net margins at the end of the day, one way or the other. And the most recent industry statistics I've seen, you probably have seen more recent ones than I have, that like if you were to let go of an employee or hire a bad employee and let them go soon and hire another one, it's about $27,000 is what that costs. Plus, like that can be higher, and that's just average, right? I mean, I'm sure some people are like, no, it's way lower for me, but it just depends. Some people are like, no, it's way more. We have more sophisticated training, more sophisticated roles. We pay a bunch of stuff up front. We do a bunch of background checks, whatever it is. That has an inherent cost to it, and I just kind of urge some of the people listening to think of that analytically, just like you do anything else. If we're talking about cost per click for advertising to generate a customer lead, how much is cost per click to generate an employee or a team member lead? It's a big difference to be able to sort of take that mindset and think of both things like an equal funnel, because nowadays that the left funnel, that sales funnel, can't even do anything if you don't have the people to do stuff with it, right? You're going to end
Yeah.
up working every day, every night, every weekend. Every dinner table is going to turn into building an estimate table versus a family dinner table. You're going to have all sorts of issues if you don't have any people, and more specifically the right people, right? So just to kind of wrap things up and summarize, we talked a lot about it being kind of like a marketing funnel. We talked about some strategies. We talked about how people should think about things. um, you mentioned just recently about like the local thing being very limited, right? I talked to a friend of mine recently. They're in a rural area like Waverly, Nebraska. Not a
Yeah.
huge area, but they're a big company. They've got 100 employees. They do millions and millions in revenue. um, and they're just like, there's not that many people, right? So they get a lot of stuff word of mouth and things like that. But they recently did what you were just mentioning, systematize hiring, right? They used to go to, I don't know how many job boards there are. There's probably hundreds, but as far or thousands. But the big ones, like Indeed and things like that, ZipRecruiter and all these different names you'll hear, you don't want to have to go to each one of those. Like if you had to go to each different one and post and update things and get all those candidates and download them and contact them, and then go to the next and do it again. Go to the next, do it again. That is not a good value in time. Now, I recently learned about your platform, and I'm not here to plug it. That's not what we're trying to do, but it's super
Please do.
inexpensive.
No.
And I mean like under $200, even if you're a big company. So I'm
Yeah.
like, that seems crazy. Like, what can you sort of speak to around like the strategy and time savings of using technology in general? It doesn't have to be HireClick, but just things
Yeah.
like that. Like, is
Yeah.
there any sort of industry statistics around how much time and effort it's saving these folks? Because the friend I talked to, he was like dozens of hours every week. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a lot for $100. So can you speak to just sort of the time savings and value of using technology to do what you just discussed?
Yeah, for sure. So, from a time savings perspective, I think the real value in tech right now are the things that either save you a bunch of time or a bunch of money, and in a lot of cases it's both, because time is money, right? And in terms like if you think of I think one of the things on paid job boards, if you think about, that kind of used to be the gold standard on how you go find new applicants. Um, that in and of itself is expensive because you're reaching really big audiences and things like that. If you use technology to go post to multiple job boards, but you also recognize as part of the optimization of that funnel that we talked about, I also need to post out to social media. I should also be, doing, all the different things that we talked about. Technology can really, really pull that together. And I've heard, many, many different statistics depending on the size of the organization, in terms of how many hours it saves and so forth. It really depends how many job openings you have, of course. But I can say this, that if you do things the right way and you're paying attention to all the things you should be paying attention to, technology could probably reduce your time by 90% versus trying to do it on your own. In addition to that, by using technology, it really allows you to build up an asset over time. In the case of recruitment, if you think about we're talking about the sales funnel versus the marketing funnel, or versus the recruitment funnel. Sorry, you think about the sales funnel, or if there's a marketing campaign that you're running to try to generate business, and you generate 300 leads for your business, you're going to use all those leads from now until eternity and try to convert them to customers. For some reason in the recruitment space, what a lot of us do as employers is we do, paid job board placement, and we go get 100 applicants, we hire one, and then we don't do anything with those other 99 people that we spent a lot of money to go get. Technology helps kind of bring that value to the forefront and really leverage that going forward. If somebody applies, maybe they're not your number one choice, but maybe they're, kind of your number two choice. We should be marketing back to them when we have a similar opening. Technology really helps that. And that's a good idea, or a good example of, in addition to saving time, should really in the end save you a lot of money too.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate sort of all that insight. Is there any sort of, 1-2 nuggets that you sort of want to leave the audience with if they're really out there and they're saying, all this is well and good, I still struggle with finding people right now. Where should I start? What should I do? Like, what would you tell somebody who just came to you off the street and said, hey, I'm really struggling with this labor crisis. Where do I start? Like, what are one of those kind of 1 to 2 wrap up nuggets you can give the listeners?
Well, first and foremost, I would really, really encourage all employers to look at their hiring process that they have today. And as much as you can, try to put yourself in the seat of a job seeker that might be a potential applicant for your business. Go through the process, really ask yourself those hard questions. How quickly are we getting back to people? Things like that. And say, if I was a job seeker, how would I want to be treated during that process? So that's really first and foremost. That's just like an internal reflection. Secondly, I would think about visibility. I would think about ease of application, all those basic building blocks that we talked about. And then the other thing that I would do is be mindful of what are we spending today to recruit new employees? Because it's very common, if somebody asked a business owner to say, well, what do you spend to find new employees? A lot of them they don't know what that answer is. It's not something that they budget for. It's just when the expense comes up, you just spend what you have to get people hired. Try to get a good idea of what that already is. And then obviously look to, can we put something in place, hopefully save money and maybe improve the overall strategy.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great, because that seems very foundational to, people like you who do it all day, every day. But there's people listening, I'm sure, who are like, I just started, I don't know what I'm doing, I need people, and there's no people, so they don't really understand the nuances of it. So one last ask I have for you guys, how do people reach you? Like, if someone's listening to this now and they're like, man, I really need him to expand on that, or I don't understand this, and I just need an olive branch or someone I can talk to. What's the best way to reach out to you if they want to either learn more about HIRECLICK and how that kind of systematizes the entire thing, or just ask questions?
For sure. So from a HIRECLICK perspective, it's a really easy website address. That's the easiest way to kind of learn more about that. www.hireclick.com. Me personally, I'm really active on LinkedIn. Scott Petersen is with an EN, not an ON. So if you search HIRECLICK or Scott Petersen, LinkedIn's a great way to reach me on that. And I'm always happy to go through and at least, share with what we're learning from lots of, customers and probably people in similar situations to you. So happy to be a resource.
Perfect. Yep. And, this is part of our one of our webinar series we've been doing lately, where we're just trying to, at ArcSite, help tackle some of the struggles that aren't necessarily ArcSite related, but that are affecting our customers, right? And our users and, friends of ours and people we know and care about and want them to be successful. So I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing this. I know it's kind of a weird topic for a tech company to be presenting, but at the end of the day, I think it's equally as impactful to their workflows and their businesses and their profitability as most other things that we can solve. So I really appreciate you taking your time and doing that. And I know we just met semi recently, so it's kind of on short terms, and you were just like, yeah, I'd be happy to help out. And I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of people who needed to hear and needed to learn exactly what you've just shared with us over the last, 30, 45 minutes. So I really appreciate that. If you don't have anything else, that's all I have. And I just want to thank all the listeners and everybody for coming and participating and asking questions and everything that you've been able to do with us here. And look forward to talking to y'all again very soon.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, thanks again, Scott. Appreciate it.